What happens when Hollywood's most unpredictable actor walks into a studio ruled by sarcasm and faces off the host who thinks he can humiliate anyone with a smirk? That night on The Late Show, Stephen Colbert thought he was setting up another viral gotcha moment. A few jokes, a few smirks, a few headlines at someone else's expense. But what he didn't expect was for Nicolas Cage to flip the entire stage and dismantle him. What began as harmless teasing quickly spiraled into a duel, not between a guest and a host, but between authentic passion and televised mockery, and before it was over, only one man was left standing. The lights of The Late Show glowed bright and perfect. Too perfect. Stephen Colbert sat behind his desk, the picture of control, shuffling his cue cards like a man about to start a game he knew he'd win. Across from him, Nicolas Cage walked in with that uneven mix of charm and mystery that only he could pull off. He waved to the crowd, smiled, and took his seat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colbert announced, voice smooth as butter, "please welcome the man who's made Hollywood laugh, cry, and sometimes just plain confused, Nicolas Cage." The audience laughed. Cage chuckled politely, but there was something in his eyes. Colbert leaned forward, elbows on the desk, smirk loaded and ready. "So, Nicholas, do you ever watch your own movies and think, maybe I went a little too Cage that day?" Cage gave a small laugh. "Well, Stephen, I think every actor has moments where they push boundaries. I believe in risk. I believe in giving everything." Colbert nodded, pretending to agree, but his grin sharpened. "Risk," he said slowly. "Yeah, that's one word for it. Others might call it chaos." The crowd chuckled. Cage smiled tightly. "Chaos is what happens when people don't understand art." Colbert didn't miss a beat. "Or when someone eats a cockroach on camera. I mean, that was art, right?" Laughter broke out again, louder this time. Cage's eyes flickered. That scene wasn't about shock. It was about truth. "About living inside a man's madness?" Colbert raised an eyebrow. "Right. And here I thought it was just you having dinner on set." Cage leaned forward slightly. "You like making jokes about people who actually try, huh?" The audience went quiet. Colbert smiled wider, sensing tension. "Come on, Nicholas. Don't take it so hard. You've got a great sense of humor. I mean, you'd have to. You've been in, 70 movies in the last 10 years? You must laugh every time you cash a check. That one hit." Cage blinked slowly, breathing through his nose. "You mean the checks that pay for art while people like you sit here mocking it?" Colbert held his hands up, mock defensive. "I'm not mocking it. I'm just fascinated. You've got an Oscar, yet somehow you're also the internet's favorite meme. That's range, Nicholas. Not everyone can go from Leaving Las Vegas to Face Off to whatever that thing with the talking pig was." Cage's tone dropped, dark and low. "That thing, as you call it, was a story about grief. Something you clearly wouldn't understand from behind a desk." "Oh, I understand grief," Colbert shot back. "I watched some of your late career movies." The audience gasped. A few laughed nervously. Cage stared at him, stone still, his jaw clenching. "You know, Stephen," he said quietly, "you invited me here to talk about my work, not to turn it into a punchline." Colbert leaned in, voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm just trying to understand, Nicholas. You say every role comes from the heart. So tell me, does every project come from passion, or do some come from overdue bills?" The crowd half laughed, half winced. Cage's hands tightened around the armrests. "You think you're clever. But I've worked harder, risked more, and cared deeper about this craft than most people in this town ever will." Colbert shrugged, casual. "And yet, they still call you Hollywood's wild card. Ever wonder why?" Cage leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe because I don't play by scripts written to please people like you." Colbert smirked, but his voice turned cutting. "Or maybe because you spent so long trying to prove you're a genius, you stopped realizing when people stopped watching." The audience went silent. Cage didn't blink. "Careful, Stephen," he said quietly. "Mocking the wrong man can make for bad television." Colbert laughed. Too loud, too fake. "Oh, I think this is great television." Cage sat back, eyes cold now. "Yeah, until it turns on you." The crowd was still warm from laughter, but the air around the desk had started to chill. Colbert leaned in, eyes gleaming. "You've become a meme factory, Nicholas. You scream, you twitch, you do whatever that was in Vampire's Kiss." The audience laughed, not comfortably, but because they felt they were supposed to. Cage kept his posture, voice calm but steady. "I'd rather be remembered for intensity than forgotten for mediocrity." Colbert smirked, tilting his head. "So, that's a yes, then?" It wasn't a question. It was a trap. The kind that gets you trending by morning. Cage didn't take the bait right away. He sat still, his silence louder than the laughter that followed. "You know, Stephen," he said finally, "there's a big difference between risk and mockery. One requires courage. The other just needs a desk and a camera." A quiet ripple went through the audience. Colbert chuckled, brushing it off. "Oh, come on, Nicholas. Don't get cagey." The pun hit like a slap. A few people laughed, but most didn't. Cage leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "I've been acting for 40 years. You've been joking about people for 15. Maybe we define work differently." Colbert's grin faltered for the first time. He tried to turn it back into a joke. "Hey, I'm just here to keep it light." "You don't have to turn it into a monologue." Cage's eyes locked on him. "You call it light because you've never carried anything heavy." The laughter died completely now. Colbert shifted in his seat, realizing this wasn't a bit. This was a warning. The mood changed. Everyone felt it. The smiles vanished. The air tightened. What started as banter had turned into judgment. Colbert wasn't done. He never was. He leaned back in his chair, pretending to relax, but his tone cut sharper with each word. "Come on, Nicholas, be honest. You've kind of become a caricature of yourself, haven't you? No one says Oscar winner anymore. They say, the crazy guy with the bees." Laughter broke out. Awkward, hesitant, the kind that sounds more like defense than amusement. Cage didn't move. He took a slow breath, the kind you take before something breaks. "That's not comedy, Stephen," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the host. "That's contempt dressed as charm." Colbert raised his eyebrows, acting wounded. "Whoa, contempt! I'm just pointing out what people are already saying. I mean, it's public knowledge." Cage leaned forward, voice tight, controlled, the edge of a blade held steady. "You invite artists here to bleed for your ratings, then call it entertainment. You want passion, but when it shows its teeth, you call it crazy." Colbert smirked. "Or maybe you just can't take a joke." Cage didn't blink. "Or maybe you can't make one that costs you something." The audience went still. You could almost hear the camera zooming in, the hum of the lights above them. Colbert tried to chuckle it off, but it died halfway through. Cage's tone dropped lower, steadier. "You don't want conversation. You want control. You turn people into punchlines and call it journalism. But tonight you picked the wrong man to laugh at." Colbert tried to recover, but the rhythm was gone. His smirk looked forced now, his posture stiff. "Nicholas, relax. You're reading way too much into this." Cage stared him down. "No, Stephen. I'm just finally reading you." Colbert's grin had turned thin now, like a mask starting to crack. He tried to move the show along, flipping his blue cards again. But Cage wasn't done. His voice came low, steady, and dangerous. "You don't ask questions to understand, Stephen," Cage said. "You ask to corner. You wear empathy like a costume, something you put on before the cameras roll." The audience let out a soft murmur. It wasn't laughter anymore. Colbert froze for a beat, his smirk tightening. "And you," he shot back, "you wear madness like a medal. You act like every meltdown is a spiritual journey." Gasps rippled through the room. Even Colbert seemed to realize he'd gone too far, but he didn't back down. The studio no longer felt like a talk show. It felt like a courtroom. Every word landed like evidence. Cage leaned in, eyes locked on him. "Madness is the tax you pay for honesty," he said. "Safe actors lie. Real ones burn." Colbert scoffed, trying to twist it into a joke. "Burn? Or implode?" Cage didn't blink. "Maybe both. That's what makes it real." A cold silence filled the room. No applause, no laughter. just tension thick enough to feel. Cage sat back, his voice soft but firm. You mock what you can't do. You call depth insanity because you're afraid to drown in it. Colbert's jaw clenched. He looked uncertain. The smirk gone, the confidence slipping. The tension in the room felt like static. Cage exhaled slowly, his eyes still locked on Colbert. You think performance is madness, he said, voice lower now, almost weary. But I think yours is emptiness. For the first time all night, Colbert's face changed. The smirk faltered just a little. He tried to recover, laughing awkwardly. You're taking this too seriously, Nicolas. It's just a show. Cage didn't blink. That's the problem, Stephen. You never take anything seriously. Not faith, not truth, not pain. His words came out calm but sharp, every syllable deliberate. You build your brand on pretending to care. You mistake irony for intelligence. The crowd didn't know where to look. At Cage burning quietly, or at Colbert shrinking behind his desk. For a brief moment, the room seemed to breathe again. Colbert forced a smile and straightened his cards. All right, he said with a laugh that didn't land. Let's talk about your new movie, shall we? It's, about vampires again? He tried to pivot. He tried to sound casual, but Cage didn't move, didn't smile, didn't play along. The silence stretched out, heavy, alive, unbreakable. Colbert's fingers fidgeted with his cue cards. Cameras kept rolling. The crew looked on from the shadows, unsure whether to cut to commercial. And then Cage spoke, quietly, almost gently. You mock what you don't understand, he said, because understanding would cost you your act. Colbert leaned forward, his voice lower, the charm gone. He was trying to take control back, to remind the audience who owned the stage. Let's be honest. Your art looks a lot like public breakdowns on screen. You call it commitment. Most people call it confusion. The air shifted instantly. Every sound in the room died, like oxygen being sucked out. Cage didn't blink, didn't flinch. He just stood, slow and deliberate, his shadow stretching under the studio lights. His voice came out cold. Confusion? You mistake emotion for chaos because you've never felt either. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Colbert froze, still holding his note cards, but his grin was gone. Cage stepped closer, not menacing, but unshakable. His tone was calm, but every syllable carried heat. I came here to talk about art, Cage said. You came to assassinate it. You wear cynicism like armor and call it intellect. Colbert forced a laugh, the kind that hides panic. You're overreacting, Nicolas. Cage's eyes narrowed. No, I'm reacting. Because I still feel something. The sentence hung in the air like a thunderclap. The audience didn't move. You could hear the buzz of the cameras, the faint hum of electricity in the lights above them. Cage's voice softened, but it was somehow even more dangerous. That's what scares you, isn't it? Feeling something real. You build walls of sarcasm. You hide behind punchlines. But underneath it all, there's nothing left. Colbert tried to speak. Couldn't. Cage took one final breath and looked him dead in the eye. You don't host a show, Stephen. You host a funeral. For sincerity, the room was frozen. No applause, no laughter. Just silence, sharp as glass. Colbert tried to laugh it off, his voice thinner now, stripped of confidence. You're being paranoid, Nicolas, he muttered, his hand twitching toward the cards he'd stopped pretending to read. This is just television. Cage didn't even blink. His answer came slow and deliberate, cutting through the air like a clean blade. No, Stephen. This is what's wrong with television. The crowd was dead quiet. You could hear the creak of his chair as he stood. Cage reached down and unhooked his mic. The sharp click echoed through the studio, louder than any applause had been all night. He looked at Colbert, steady and unflinching. You wanted a headline, Stephen? Here it is. Art just fired your script. Colbert opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The smirk that had carried him through 1,000 interviews was gone. All that was left was a man staring up at someone who refused to play his game. Cage turned, slow and certain, his voice steady as he took a final step toward the edge of the stage. You can keep the cameras, he said quietly. The laughter. The act, he paused, letting it hang. I'll keep my soul. He walked off. No music, no outro, no cue to commercial. Just the sound of his footsteps fading into the kind of silence that television never allows. Colbert sat frozen behind his desk, staring into his untouched coffee mug. His own reflection stared back at him. The man who always had the last word, realizing, for the first time, the punchline had landed squarely on him. And just like that, the night that was supposed to be another late-night laugh turned into something no one could forget. Nicolas Cage didn't storm out. He walked out with dignity. He left a studio built on mockery and reminded millions watching that passion isn't madness, indecency isn't weakness. If you believe art still deserves respect, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and tell us, was Cage out of line, or did he finally say what every artist's been wanting to say for years?